Hello, today I am going to talk about Cuba and their 60-year fight for freedom. So, Cuba is known as the Pearl of the Antilles. It is an island that has been suffering through civil unrest since 1959. Decades of oppressed rights and limited access to essential resources has finally come to a head, which has been amplified by the coronavirus pandemic. The role of mass media not only plays a large role in Cuban politics, but also what the rest of the world is seeing, which is interesting to note because this year, seeing Cuba come into light and actually getting to really get a deeper feel for what they are going through and the role that media plays in it is something that has been really fascinating for me to learn about. So let's start off with asking ourselves, what is the role of the United States? So the United States has been under a lot of scrutiny because of their lack of involvement. Um, Biden's lack of initiative is believed to be motivated by primarily by political relationships between the US and other countries. He has promised to instill more sanctions on the country if changes are not made by the Cuban government, but that's something that we will need to see what happens. He definitely has felt the pressure lately of how to act and what to do. So, what does China have to do with it? China is relevant because they are also a communist country, just like Cuba, and has been for over 70 years. Um, their alliance to Cuba has not only helped the Cuban government stay afloat, but also played a large role in why the US has kind of hesitated to get involved. Chinese companies have played a key part in building Cuba's telecommunications infrastructure, a system the regime uses to control its people, just as the China Communist Party does within its own borders. So, due to the fact that the US has commercial involvement and an economically thriving relationship with China, Biden proceeds with caution moving forward. Um, the relationship between China and Cuba has not only made things a little bit more complicated for the US, but also has contributed to the fact that the Cuban government and the communist regime has been able to uh, basically keep functioning even with all these protests and all the unrest that's happening. So the role of mass media, how does that come into play? Well, it's a huge component, if not the most important component. The US media outlets, they're pretty opinionated when it comes to this topic, mostly do seem in support of the American involvement in the crisis. Some media outlets, which come from a little bit more of a liberal background, and I'll get into the conservative side, blame the embargo placed by the US. However, most agree that it's the government to blame. The United States' newfound interest in these protests has led to a massive wave of news coverage that not only has placed Cuba under the spotlight, but is putting pressure on political leaders. The tides seem to be shifting towards a stronger participation by the American government. In an article written in DC-based newspaper The Hill, Teixeira, which is the author, argues that the Biden administration eventual response to the protests is mostly restricted to quote unquote meaningless statements of solidarity and concern, and even more meaningless individual sanctions whose practical effects are exactly zero. So basically, a lot of the media is saying that Biden is not doing enough and these sanctions don't really mean much. So a direct result of the media involvement is seen in Biden's response, which was that the United States imposed sanctions on the Cuban police force and two of its leaders in response to the Havana government's crackdown on protesters, and President Joe Biden promised Cuban American leaders more actions were coming. So this seems to be a direct result of pressure being placed on the Biden administration, not only by Cuban American lawmakers, but also by the American people. This topic has gained significant momentum in the recent months, more specifically in the media, and therefore is creating a larger urgency for change. So basically, one can argue that that Biden issuing the sanctions is a direct result from the pressure he is feeling from the people, which is only amplified by the media. So how does the agenda setting theory come into play? Well, what is the agenda setting theory? For starters, it's the media's capability through repeated news coverage of raising the importance of an issue in the public's mind. So although the crisis in Cuba has been going on for over 60 years, so it's been a while, it's not necessarily a new topic. It has gained global attention up until recently. And yes, obviously the protests kind of sparked it, but at the same time, it's leading to a extensive media coverage that is making people pay attention. Agenda setting is the filter mass media perform when selecting certain issues and portraying them frequently and prominently, which leads people to perceive those issues as more important than others. So this kind of examines the connection between the media and these types of social and political issues. Researchers can take it a step further and see how the media can be the vessel for which positive change is brought onto fruition on the island. So this could be a positive thing, which I'll get into more detail in the next slide. So I wanted to cover the role of social media because I find it particularly relevant to this topic. So although the Cuban government has unsuccessfully attempted to control its people with what they show in the media, the Cubans have risen above. And social media changes political agenda setting dynamics for 3 reasons, which I have found in my research, which is that they are a relevant channel for political they are a relevant channel for political communication. They expand the number and types of actors who can potentially shape the agenda, and using social media, political actors can potentially reach the broader public via traditional media. So although this information in this article that I found is necessarily kind of painting it in a negative light in regards to politics, I wanted to talk about it in a positive setting because there could be a positive connection here, which is that the Cuban people can benefit from agenda setting to spread awareness of the devastating conditions they are currently under. So social media can be a tool for these people to be able to, and it has been a tool for people to be able to communicate and showcase what is happening in their island, even if the media and their access to the media is so restricted. So what's Cuba's relationship with the mass media, and what is the ethics of it all? So since Cuba is under a communist regime, the media is tightly controlled by the government, which is something that, is not as common to see today. Only select few countries have a communist government. So it's really fascinating, but also so sad and scary to see it in effect in our time, in these modern times. So Cuba forbids independent print or broadcast media, and reports in the state-run press have long consisted mostly of transcriptions of official Communist Party declarations. So, I mean, we can't imagine what it must be like to be in that situation, but based off of my research and seeing and knowing and having conversations with people whose families are still there or have lived there previously, it's a real thing, and it's something that is so difficult to wrap our heads around, but is a reality they are facing. So the development of social media has helped Cubans connect and communicate with the rest of the world, as I was explaining previously. So obviously, this type of censoring that Cubans have to deal with is unethical, not only because it is not giving the Cuban people fair and open access to information and communication channels, but it's also illegal in most of the world. We as humans are entitled, and it's our right to be able to not only communicate freely, but also be able to have access to other people communicating freely, and be able to exchange that information within ourselves and within the rest of the world. So the fact that they are cut off is very clearly unethical. And also the way that the media portrays the information within Cuba is also unethical, and what they're censoring and what they are allowing the people to have access to. So this so social media actually has narrowed the knowledge gap when it comes to information being accessed, because it's helping people connect and also educate. So Cubans are educating the rest of the world on what is going on. So what's next, right? What can we do? So the agenda setting theory, applying it to the Cuban crisis and the media coverage surrounding it, can help bring light to how this event has developed. So really, it's a vessel, right? So we can use media to educate and raise awareness and help these people, and hopefully reach a level of so they can reach a level, I'm sorry, of freedom and relief. Most importantly, it's what it boils down to is that media can play a big role in the progress of Cuba towards achieving a long-awaited democracy. News of Cuba and its desperate state is spreading quicker than wildfire throughout the world. So people are becoming more aware of it, even though it's been happening for over 60 years. So agenda setting can ultimately help the Cuban people reach their fundamental right. It's their right of political freedom, which to me is such a more of a personal topic, because being raised in Miami, I have really felt that effect, and I have seen and felt the suffering of the Cubans, but also their family members who are still on the island. The media continues to extensively cover this topic. Global citizens should take the time to do the proper research and educate themselves as much as they can. Agenda setting can help the Cuban people reach their fundamental right, which is what I was talking about. And ultimately, the main takeaway from all of this is that the Cuban people are becoming a unified force, calling out the rest of the world and calling out to the rest of the world, and they deserve to be heard. So that's basically the gist of my presentation, and thank you so much for listening.